Mark Hammond, a former gangster who once belonged to the Collins gang, must be dead excited to go to work because he's fast asleep on top of his bed, fully clothed in a suit and tie. Either that or the developers didn't want him going through the missions wearing a pair of pyjamas. He's awoke by a noise outside. 3 people, Yasmin, Harry and Grievous, who were all working for the Bethnal Green mob, are attempting to abduct his son, Alex Hammond, and his wife, Susie Hammond. His wife and son scream for help as Mark quickly rushes outside. By the time he gets to the street, his wife has been shot and is bleeding badly, while the gangsters have kidnapped Alex and put him in the back of a getaway car. Mark, like a f***ing idiot, picks up the murder weapon and puts his DNA all over it as his wife dies in his arms. Her last words are,
"Your dad told me you might be captain of the squad this year."
A witness in the background clutches her pearls at Hammond holding a gun and running away from his dead wife's body. Susie! Hammond gets to his car and chases the gangsters. He chases them all across London at high speeds to a warehouse in Southwark.
Yeah, they must be inside.
As he arrives, he immediately shoots a gang member right in the stomach and then triggers an explosion to some irresponsibly placed flammable liquids. Kills several more gang members, has a little rest and makes his way upstairs into an office, where he finds his son in the hands of an old gangster he used to know from his past, Charlie Jolson. Before he can do anything, Mark is knocked out from behind by eyebrows and put into a chair. He awakens shortly after and is surrounded by Harry, Grievous and Eyebrows. No idea why it's called Eyebrows.
Eyebrows.
They don't believe he's awake enough, so they make him even more awaker by shoving smelling salts under his nose. Mark doesn't appreciate this.
Where's my son, you fat b****?
Charlie explains to Mark what's going to happen from now on. Mark is going to do exactly what Charlie asks of him, or his son dies. Mark doesn't seem to be listening too good, so Eyebrows punches him in the ear.
Eyebrows.
Eyebrows gives Mark a mobile phone. A sexy trombone plays in the background. When it rings, he has to answer and go through with whatever demand Jolson asks of him. It's like his little simpy boy. One caveat. If this were the plan all along, why was all those people outside trying to kill him? If Hammond would have died in that shootout, the Bethnal Green mob would have gone to all that trouble just to kidnap a small schoolboy for no reason.
Idiots! Bloody amateurs!
Hammond wakes up inside of a Range Rover outside of the warehouse. His phone is ringing. It's Charlie. Charlie orders Mark to go and pay his old friend a visit, Nick Collins. He owns a bar called The Republic. Mark is to shoot the place up and set it on fire. Mark doesn't think that's a good idea.
You're off your f***ing rocker, Charlie.
Because Mark used to work with Nick in the past and was part of the Collins gang. The Collins gang. Very creative. How's he going to explain that one away if he ever gets arrested? So Mark, like a good little boy, drives down to Soho to commit domestic terrorism. On his way there, he has to avoid the police, who's blocked off the road with some silky smooth driving and not look suspicious in the slightest. As soon as he gets there, he blasts a bald-headed man in a waistcoat and enters the establishment. As he walks through the ground floor, pistol whipping anyone in sight, he's recognised by one of his former colleagues. One lady, unenthusiastically, begs for her life.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Mark clears up another room, but needs to lean on a wall to soak up the bullets.
I need a rest.
As he kills the last remaining gangsters, the lights on the wall somehow set fire to the place. What are they?
Shit, the lamps! Watch out!
Oil lamps. He manages to get out alive. However, he is really sad about killing his friends. But at the same time, he had quite a laugh doing it. Mark receives a phone call from Charlie, who's in the back seat of a Bentley. Mark believed, foolishly, that this was a one and done situation. However, Charlie wants Mark to invade a triad party at an art gallery, and while he's there, he needs to steal a statue that contains a kilo of skag. And then we cut to a right nice pair of titties. Mark phones his friend, Liam Spencer, for help, who is also part of the Collins gang. Liam seems to be a little bit annoyed at Mark for killing all of his friends, but he explained that he had to do it for his dead wife and his living son. Mark tells Liam to keep his ear to the ground and he'll phone him back later.
Yeah, no.
So, off he pops to the Reptilian Gallery in Hyde Park. The lady behind the desk asks,
Hello, sir. Can I help?
but Mark says nothing. It could be a trick. So he stares blankly into her eyes, not to arouse suspicion. He wants to avoid attention, but also get to his destination really fast. So he runs around the gallery, but makes sure he looks at each piece of art on the wall while doing so.
Moore was obviously psychotic when he painted this. I hear it was a bedwetter.
Hammond puts his back against the wall to initiate some stealth, but accidentally pulls his guns out instead. The triads begin to fire. As he makes his way to the second floor, he heroically uses innocent civilians as human shields, as to not sustain any more damage. This works a treat, but once he reaches the basement, he runs out of humans to sacrifice, so he's back down to his cat-like reflexes. Once Mark clears out the room, he grabs a statue full of lovely heroin. Mark makes a quick getaway in a Renault Laguna because he knows it can easily outrun the Triad's Honda Civic. The Chinese gangsters look on in disgust as they talk in some type of foreign language I don't understand. Luckily, one of the Triads speaks in English.
They shall pay for this insult.
It must be second generation. Because Hammond is proper cack in his pants, he drives like a complete thus causing his car engine to plume smoke. So, he has no choice but to mow down a couple of policemen and then hijack another Renault Laguna. As I said just before, is the optimum vehicle to outrun the Triads 1996 Honda Civic Coupe Series 6. After f***ing around for ages, Mark arrives at the Spotted Dog pub, where Harry, Grievous and Walter sit watching Charlie smoke a cigar, while some type of ragtime music plays on the jukebox. All of a sudden, Mark comes storming in, giving it a big un, saying if Charlie wants his statue, then he has to give him his son back. This annoys Harry, who thinks he's been well out of order. Mark aims a gun at him, and Charlie thinks this is even more out of order. Suddenly, the bartender gingerly hits him over the head with a bottle, which somehow knocks him out. I believe Mark's been out cold 3 times now. The poor can end up with CTE. Harry, like the hard man he is, kicks a floored Hammond, saying he'll do him badly. You know he's only doing this to show off in front of his boss. Arse liquor. Charlie says he's sending Mark on another mission, and good old Eyebrows is going with him.
Eyebrows.
They're going to break Jake Jolson, Charlie's nephew, out of a prison van during an escort. Mark remembers Jake from the old days when they were enemies. Or frenemies. No, enemies. Mark then receives a phone call from Liam. He tells him that he hasn't seen any sign of Alex, but believes he's probably at Charlie's warehouse. Outside, Eyebrows is waiting for Mark to accompany him on their next exciting mission. He climbs into the passenger seat and tells him to drive to the Old Bailey. I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Eyebrows.
As Mark gets close to the Old Bailey, he sees the prison van in the distance. Members of the Bethnal Green gang ram into a cop car, which then sets on fire. But Mark's not distracted, he follows the van. Hammond needs to find a way to stop this van before it reaches its destination. He has this ingenious idea of ramming it from behind. This somehow works and destroys the engine, and it begins to plume out black smoke. The van driver thinks, "F*** this, you can have him. It's not worth it."
Eyebrows.
Gets out of the car and mows down a couple of pigs with an AK-47. Suddenly, Jake appears. He climbs out of the van and embraces Eyebrows, with a big hug and a sniff on the top of his head. But the hug, he doesn't last too long, because he notices a massive prick sat in the driver's seat. The prick being Hammond. Eyebrows pulls out a dead body from the boot of the car. It's a body double of Jake. They hope by setting it on fire, the police won't do any silly things like check for DNA and stuff. Suddenly, some heroic policeman, wearing double denim, screeches around the corner and then unheroically flips his car, making himself look like a complete bell end. Jake thinks that it'd be right funny if he sneaks up on all the gang members waiting for his return. It's not.
Good job.
Some tubby goes up to Jake and gives him his neck for him to strangle him as a present, because he knows he's into things like that, because it's a bit weird. After a quick squeeze, he's like, actually, your real present's upstairs. It's a couple of guys involved in some kind of kinky sex game. It's one of the Yakuza, Johnny Chai. Johnny struggles with the pain of being electrocuted, while Team Soho struggle with the pain of animating jumper lead cables. While all the Bethnal Green mob hang around getting right turned on, Mark just walks straight into Charlie's office. He finds a map of London with key areas circled. Mark phones Liam and gives him the addresses. A depot in King's Cross, a lockup on Scoresby Street, and a mansion in Mayfair. He asks him to search these areas to see if there's any sign of Alex. Jake walks in and catches Hammond talking on the phone and pointing at a map that's full of crucial information. Jake thinks nothing of it and instructs Hammond to take dead Johnny's dead body to Chinatown and dump it outside of a Chinese restaurant. In turn, this will anger the triads, who will then chase Mark all the way to Worship Street where Jake and the boys will be waiting. That plan's not convoluted at all. Hammond aimlessly drives around London because he has no clue where this Chinese restaurant actually is. And the only indication he's got are the indicators on the car, which do a really bad job at indicating where he should go. After about half an hour, Johnny's body arrives at the destination. As soon as he touches the ground, a couple of triads are like, "Nah, this ain't right, you better go and chase him." So all the triads do. All the way to that place I said earlier. Mark then lures the Asians into this courtyard, but then he soon realises it's a trap. It's full of angry yardies. So this convoluted plan has got even more convoluted. Mark gets out of there by the skin of his bell end. He receives a call from Harry. Harry says he's got another job for him to do. He wants him to break into a police station and execute a bent copper called Clive McCormack. McCormack has been working with Charlie, but he's also been working with the Yardies at the same time, so he feels a little bit betrayed. And oh yeah, you gotta kill Yasmin and all. That's that bitch who kidnapped your son at the beginning of the game. Mark is then instructed to go and find a van on the other side of London. Once he's inside the van, he's told, no, that's not the real van. The real van is heading its way to the police station because it's got a telephone repairman inside of it. And also you've got to ram that van off the road. Which then stops the telephone repairman going to the police station so you can pretend to be a telephone repairman. Once he arrives, he's escorted by a police officer to where the faulty phones are in the police station.
Go mate, all yours.
Which is why the police needed a telephone repairman to begin with. The policeman leaves Mark alone to get on with the job. But instead of fixing the telephones, Mark walks over to the evidence room and picks up the first gun he sees that's on the floor. As soon as he leaves the evidence room, there he is, the bent copper. He has the opportunity to get the job done, but he doesn't. He opts for more firepower. Once Mark's got some bigger guns, like a legend, he shoots McCormack in the back. Once dead, Mark gobs all over him. He enters the interrogation room where Yasmin is sat smoking. She puts her argument forward for Mark to not kill her. She says she knows where his kid is, but Mark doesn't know if he can trust her. Yasmin says she's asking for Mark's help, but she's not going to beg him. Mark considers a quick blower for that post-nut clarification, but he probably hasn't got time. He thinks, oh, fuck it, come on, 2 heads are better than 1. Let's blast some pigs and get out of here. So Yasmin and Mark blast said pigs, and then escape in a police car. Mark parks outside Charlie's depot and phones Harry. He tells him that McCormack is dead, and also Yasmin, but he lies about that. Because now Charlie thinks Yasmin is dead, he wants to replace her with another piece of fluff. Mark's old boss, Nick Collins, has poached one of Charlie's girls with the promise of a pay rise and a pension. He wants Mark to get her back by kidnapping her. Mark thinks this is a stupid idea and he'd rather go to Yardies and start grassing. But Yasmin, for some reason, thinks this is a right good idea. So they go and do it. As they both enter the strip club, an inevitable shootout occurs, where Mark makes sure everybody dies. But the problem is, everybody dies, including that bird Charlie wanted kidnapping. This pisses Hammond off. He shoots his gun in the air, and he blames everyone but himself. Yasmin says not to worry because she's got an idea, and a f***ing stupid idea at that. She decides to dress up as the girl herself. Mark gets on the blower to Charlie and he asks to talk to Layla. That's the prostitute Yasmin's pretending to be. Yasmin gets on the phone to Charlie and puts on a girly accent to sound even more like a girl, I guess. And like a proper bell sniff, he falls for it.
I've always got time for my big Charlie boy, ain't I?
You better be sorry. You're a naughty girl.
Charlie tells Mark he's got one final mission for him. He wants him to go over to a crack house and steal Yardie drug money. He reckons it's about 300 grand. Mark refuses. Charlie reminds Mark if he doesn't do what he says, he's going to torture and kill his son, Alex. Mark's like, fuck Alex. I'm sick and tired of doing this. I just want to go home and go to bed. And then he says he can just go and make another son anyway because he's got plenty more coming, his bollocks. Charlie says you can keep all the money. Mark asks, what's the address? So Hammond drops Yasmin off at Charlie's, dressed as his favourite prostitute. I've heard of the saying, you don't look at the mantelpiece while you're poking the fire, but this just takes the piss. This were an employer about 4 hours ago. I think he's gonna notice. Anyway, Mark drives to the crack den to see if they'll give him that 300 grand. They say no, so Mark has to hurt them with bullets. Once everybody's hurt to death, including the DJ, he finds the big bag of cash and then phones his mate Liam. He tells him to come to the crack house because he's going to stash the money in the boot of a car. A car what's parked outside of a crack house where there's just been a gunfight and there's dead bodies all over the place. Nice hiding place, clever clogs. Mark makes his way to the depot where he meets Jake Jolson, Eyebrows, and that guy who tortured that other man. As Mark walks by some bins, he sees a cat. This gives him a right good idea. An idea for a prank. Mark knows that Eyebrows, Jake, and Torture Boy are right sets of nosy bastards. So if he walks up to them with a bag in his hand, they're going to ask what's inside. And, as predicted, they do. He tells them it's a bag of heavily soiled Razmags that he was just going to throw out. Jake's like, Razmags? I like Razmags. Give me the Razmags. What are you doing throwing pornography away like that? Don't ever do that again. Mark throws the bag to Jake. Jake opens the bag and the cat jumps straight out and onto his face. The prank worked like a treat. The boys proper shit themselves. The problem is they didn't find it funny at all and they start shooting the guns. Mark realises he's f***ed up and chips it into the warehouse. What he thought was just going to be a bit of a laugh has turned into a matter of life and death. Mark thinks to himself, f*** it, why am I trying to make friends with him anyway? There'd be no but dickheads to me. I might as well just kill him. Mark manages to kill Sparky. That's his name, by the way. But Eyebrows and Jake run off like little girls. Mark catches up to Jake and fills him with shotgun shot, but Jake's just too hard for out like that. All of a sudden, Mark hears a familiar voice.
Come on, Marky, Marky.
It's Eyebrows.
He killed the Spark!
Mark is ambushed again, and I'm assuming he's been knocked out yet again. I'm surprised he remembers he's even got a son at this point, with the amount of blunt force trauma he's had to his skull. Who gets knocked unconscious 4 times in one day? Mark awakens in a cellar with Yasmin laying next to him. Unsurprisingly, Yasmin's dog shit plan didn't work. Charlie reveals his final plan that he's been preparing all along. He wants to remove all the other gangs in London. So he's going to lower all the gang leaders onto a boat with a bomb on it. And then when they're all on it, he's going to blow it up. Leaving Charlie to run London on his own, like Mr. Billy Big Bollocks. How is he going to lure all the gang leaders onto the boat? By giving them Mark Hammond, the bellsniff who's been running around killing everyone. And then they just leave because they've got other things to do. While Yasmin and Mark sit there feeling sorry for themselves, they suddenly hear a voice from outside. It's Frank Carter, the policeman in double denim, who made a right tit of himself by flipping over his car. Frank is obsessed with stopping Jolson and he believes Mark can help him. Frank breaks them out of the cellar and then just fucks off, leaving Mark and Yasmin to fend for themselves. Luckily, Mark finds a gun so he can just shoot his way out of the warehouse. Yasmin and Mark drive to Charlie's mansion and enter through the basement. Yasmin told Mark that Charlie's mansion has got amazing security, but Mark thought just like a ring doorbell or something, not fucking laser beams. Even though Mark sees the laser beams, he still walks straight through it because he thinks, fuck it, what's a laser beam gonna do to me? But little did he know, it triggers some type of toxic gas. So, in future, he better not do that. Mark makes his way through the mansion with ease, because Team Soho have created a game engine where the character's movement is so nimble, he can glide past the laser beams with pixel-perfect accuracy. Mark and Yasmin get to the top floor of the house. Mark looks out of the window. It's Alex. He's been moved to a different location. Why was Mark so determined to get to the top floor anyway? Mark decides to phone Frank Carter, who's at Charlie's depot, where he's watching Jake from a distance. Jake has the detonator for the bomb and is about to head for the boat. Mark and Yasmin have no choice. They have to get to that ship. On board the ship, all the other gangs have arrived and it's popping off. Mark and Yasmin sneak on board and take care of all the gangsters on deck. They make their way to the engine room, where they find Alex strapped to a bomb. Yasmin unties him. Mark has a goosey gander at Charlie's bomb. Yasmin says it's not activated. Apparently, she's a bomb expert now. Then appears Frank asking where the detonator is and where Charlie is. Yasmin's like, look, we're all here, we're all alive, let's do one. But Frank's like, nah, I want to wait for Charlie because I want to shoot him in the face. Then appears Charlie and he's got Nick Collins with him. And Nick Collins is pointing a gun to his head. And Mark's mate's there too. They order Mark, Yasmin and Frank to drop their guns. But not Alex because he ain't got one. More of Nick's men are positioned around the room. Nick is furious at Mark for killing his men and wants to shoot him immediately. Liam, however, talks Nick out of it. Mark tries to explain himself, but the Yardies arrive. And then the Triads too. They all have a little vote and they all agree they'd like to kill Mark. But they'll let him tell his side of the story first, which is nice. Mark explains about how Charlie and his men killed his wife and kidnapped his son. He tells them how Charlie blackmailed him into doing jobs all over London. And if he didn't do them, they'd kill his son. Charlie had Mark with each gang separately in order to start a gang war. And it worked, because look at you now. A bunch of mugs on a boat full of explosives ready to blow. Charlie laughs at Mark's story and says he's talking proper cacabobbins. Frank then steps in and backs up Mark's story, but they tell him to piss off because he's not but a fucking peeler. Nick then agrees to let Mark, Yasmin and Alex go, but all of them have to leave London tonight. Mark asks Nick to spare Frank's life because he's helped him out quite a bit actually. But Nick's like, you what? As if. And Mark's like, in a bit dog shit. But then, once they're off the ship, it explodes. Frank sat in his car with his partner, Joe Fielding. Frank's talking bollocks and showing off about when he arrests people, he tightens the handcuffs extra tight. He suddenly sees Eyebrows, or as Frank Carter calls him,
Brown.
What's Eyebrows doing here? Surely he's dead. No, we've gone back in time, haven't we? Back to the past. We're going to see the same story from a different perspective. Eyebrows meets up with the boys, Jake Jolson and Sparky. They've come to a brothel because they think it's about time Sparky lost his virginity. Because he can't be going around electrocuting people all the time just to get his rocks off. It's not normal. Joe calls for backup, but Frank wants to be the hero and says he's going in. But Joe's like, why don't we just call for backup? What's point in being part of the police if he's just going to go in and do stuff like that? But Frank's like, I'm going in. To say Joe didn't want to go in without backup, he fucking sprints as fast as he can towards the brothel. Maybe he wanted to see a bit of minge before it all got scared away.
Come on, Frank, what's keeping you?
As they search for the baddies inside, they discover that the building is dilapidated. Which is weird because every brothel that I've been to has always been really nice. At the risk of ruining his double denim, Carter side strafes along a wall because the floor has fallen through. And then he bumps into Joe, who's been shot in the gut. He says,
Frank, I'll never get this stain out. Go after him. Don't worry, just get him. Go upstairs.
That's some right good voice acting there, Joe. One and done. Frank goes upstairs where the backup are arresting Crazy Jake Jolson. So basically, Frank could have waited for the backup after all, because they're wearing armour and they've got better guns than that. Plus, his partner has now got a bullet lodged in his lower intestines for no reason. DC Carter goes outside where DC Fielding is just flopping around while everybody watches and does nout. Frank's like, I guess I'll just take him to hospital then, yeah? Thanks. Charlie's on the dog and bone with that crooked copper from before. Charlie's well annoyed that Frank has arrested his nephew Jake and wants him well away from this interrogation. Frank walks into the office right excited about the arrest. He can't wait to kick the f*** out of Jake and put the handcuffs on him really tight. But McCormack's like, nah, you're too close to the case, mate. You can't do it. It's procedure. While McCormack is interrogating Jake, Jake gives the bent copper a bit of information about Jamal and the Yardies. They've got a crack delivery happening down at the Thames. Jake tells him this, hoping that the judge will give him a bit of leniency, when he goes to prison. But it was all a plan. Because they knew that DC Carter would be in the other room, earwigging, being proper nosy and that, wanting to know what were going off. And it worked. Because DC Carter slivers off to find the crack delivery, leaving Jake and McCormack to their own devices. Frank drives over to the depot and encounters a number of Yardies who attempt to kill him. With guns and overhead cranes. Once he makes it through the maze of shipping containers, Frank and the SO-19 finish off the remaining Yardies. Once the coast is clear, DC Carter spots a white van where Jerome and Tyler, the top yardie boys, are just sat chilling.
You're under arrest.
While they're being arrested, they call the police naughty words like bumberclart and pussyclart. Once they're in the back of the van, they want to know how the police even found out about this crack delivery. Then they just jump to the conclusion without any evidence that it must be the triads. Meanwhile, Frank returns to his car. He gets a call from dispatch over the radio. Shots have been fired outside of the Republic. Remember, the Republic, one of the first missions where you shot up your mate's club with Mark Hammond. Well, that's what that is. Frank gets down to the Republic where the firemen are trying to put out the fire. But angry members of the Collins gang have took to the street to shoot at them. They sound like a set of thick bastards to me. What have the firemen done? Ungrateful. But anyway, Frank kills them all. Meanwhile, in Chinatown, it's all kicking off between the triads and the yardies. Everybody's just kung fu fighting. They were fast as lightning. And one witness said it was a little bit frightening. The yardies have invaded Chinatown to carry out revenge on the triads for grassing about that crack delivery, even though they ain't done it. Frank knows he has to get down there because he can't have these two gangs on the streets killing each other because that's his job. DC Carter shoots his way along the streets of Chinatown, being more of a nuisance if out. He sees a bunch of yardies and triads fleeing into a nearby NCP car park. He follows them, and after a lengthy gunfight, the gang war is over. And he's done it without ruining his double denim. While DC Carter picks up some evidence with a pen, f***ing McCormack turns up and starts giving out about how that was right dangerous what he had just done. DC Carter says he saved lives today. McCormack says he's endangered lives today. McCormack tells Frank he needs to be at Crazy Jake Jolson's transfer to prison. Frank's like, nah, I'm undercover. I don't do escorts. Undercover? What's he undercover as? A serial killer? He's overcover, if anything. McCormack tells him,
You'll do whatever I f***ing tell you, do you hear?
Charlie phones McCormack with coffee in hand. He tells him he wants his nephew, Jake Jolson, back on the streets and not locked up in prison. Charlie reckons that his nephew is a little highly strung, but he's got a good heart and he means well. McCormack, showing he's got a bit of bollocks about him, says no, he ain't got a good heart, but he's a mad dog that needs putting down. Charlie, surprisingly, doesn't fly off the handle, but laughs it off instead. Probably because he knows McCormack hasn't got long to live anyway. DC Carter follows the prison van from a distance, when suddenly a police car is hit from the side by a Range Rover. And it somehow catches fire. Frank Carter, the saviour he believes he is, disobeys his orders as usual, because that's gone well in the past. He decides to chase the Range Rover and leaves the convoy, and fucking the entire operation up, because behind him is Mark Hammond and Eyebrows, getting ready to ram the police van off the road, and freeing Jake Jolson and killing a bunch of policemen in doing so. Frank drives at high speeds, running over anybody that gets in his way. Fuck him! And then he uses the old "I'm gonna ram into the back of their car until it somehow destroys the engine" trick. You know, the classics. And it works. And then he doesn't arrest them or anything, he just lets them perish in a fire. He then hastily makes his way back to where he should have been in the first place, because it's gone all kinds of tits up, because he wasn't doing his job properly. And then, if he hasn't f***ed up enough, he decides it's a right good idea to drive directly into machine gun fire. Frank must have some type of epiphany, because he realises that some of the bullets might not just hit the car, some might hit him in the head. So the best course of action is just to turn the steering wheel right hard, and then that flips his car. McCormack is obviously pissed. He says he's had it up to his middle bollock with Frank's lunatic antics. They've got 6 dead police officers with 6 breadwinners not bringing the bread home. Frank replies with, "You must be having a bubble." He wants to know where the information were about the machine guns and the rocket launchers. He claims it must be a setup. Frank says the entire operation stinks. It's a stinky operation. McCormack tells him to do one. You're suspended without pay. DC Carter says he's not even bothered, he'll just get some money out of evidence room. Suddenly, a worried policewoman approaches Frank looking worried. 2 new DCs, Ryan and Harris, aren't responding to their police radios. She says they're supposed to be keeping watch of the Yardy crack house. Even though Frank is now suspended, he decides that the best course of action is to see what's going on. DC Carter shoots his way inside and makes his way through the building. On the second floor, Frank discovers that the Yardies are growing sticky dank weed. From the top floor, you can hear the screams of the 2 police officers. They're being tortured.
Jesus, they're torturing them.
Torturing policemen is illegal, so he has no choice but to kill them all. DC Carter unties the police officers. DC Ryan reveals to Frank that Clive McCormack sent him there to try and uncover a link between the Triads and the Yardies, which Frank knows is utter bollocks. Suddenly, there's a commotion outside. It's the f***ing Triads coming to raid a Yardy crack house. What's going on? Frank starts second-guessing himself. Maybe he has to apologise to a few people, start licking a few bumholes. But, unbeknownst to Frank, outside, it's Mark Hammond. He's the one who lured the Triads to the Yardy crack house. Frank makes his way to Snow Hill to apologise to McCormack and to try and save his job. He sees him leaving work, so he decides to follow him home.
McCormack, where are you going? It's such a...
He follows him all the way to a depot in King's Cross called Gilbert's. What's McCormack up to? Maybe he's just going to a cash and carriage to pick up a few things, buying in bulk to save a bit of money. There's no illegal about that. Frank follows McCormack through the depot, taking cover behind some crates. McCormack gives orders to the gangsters and explains how they're going to sell Jamal and the Yardies their own guns back. Some of the gangsters are like, nah, Charlie Jolson, he ain't going to like this. But some of the other gangsters are like, Charlie's just a little tosser, McCormack's the daddy now. Frank can hear McCormack talking on the phone through an air vent. He's telling someone about the whereabouts of Joe Fielding, prostitute lover and Frank's partner. He's being held at the UCL hospital. Frank decides he'll have to wait to kill McCormack and rushes to the hospital to save his partner instead. He steams through the hospital with machine gun in hand and gets to the room where Joe is alive and well. Joe reveals to Frank that McCormack is brown bread. He's been killed at Snow Hill by Mark Hammond. Frank's like, Jesus, I were only with him a bit ago. How fast? He tells Joe about following him to that depot and him saying that right incriminating stuff. And then Frank reveals McCormack, he might be corrupt. And Joe's like, yeah, I know. I fought that for ages. And then goes on to tell Frank about a lock-up garage in Scoresby Street, which allegedly has some files in it that could incriminate Charlie and put him down for good. And Frank's like, what files? And Joe's like, just some files, incriminating files. Frank makes it to Scoresby Street where the garage is. And surprise, surprise, it's full of gangsters. They're here to protect the super secret special files. He sees a few pieces of paper just strewn around the place. And he picks them up and he's like, what the f*** are these? These aren't files. They're just pieces of paper. He goes to throw them away, but then he realises there's writing on these pieces of paper. He reads them and discovers Charlie Jolson, big-time kingpin, runs all of London, has written down all his illegal activities like a small child. He's even wrote down a list of all the buildings that he controls where he does all the illegal activities inside of. And Frank's like, yeah, I'm going to bust every place on this list, starting with the warehouse at Southwark. Frank rushes down to the lockup and shoots the 2 gangsters that are stood there guarding the place. And then the mission fails. So now Frank realises it's a stealth mission and he'll have to start again. After a bit of stealthing, Frank overhears the gangsters talking about the capture of Mark Hammond and Yasmin. They also talk about the Solvita, that ship with all the explosives on, and Charlie's plan to kill all the other gangs in London. It's like Gossip Girls or something around here. Frank finds his way inside the dungeon that Mark and Yasmin are in. Charlie, Harry and Jake discuss their plans. They talk about getting the Yardies, Triads and the Collins gang all on one boat and then blowing it up. Charlie says before Sparky died, he made a bomb and Eyebrows has transported it onto the ship. And he needs Jake to go to the depot to pick up the detonator. They walk past Frank, but they don't notice him. Frank makes it to the cell where Mark and Yasmin are, but they say the exact same things as they do in the Hammond mission, so I'm not going to bother talking about it. Frank shoots off the lock and they escape. So, it's back to the depot for Frank. He watches Jake and the Bethnal Green mob load guns into the back of a van. He gets a phone call from Hammond. Mark and Yasmin have been rummaging around Charlie's mansion, walking through laser beams. Frank tells them that Charlie is taking Alex to the boat with all the bombs on it. Hammond makes his way to the docks while Frank keeps an eye on Jake with the detonator. Frank arrives at the Solvita and he starts popping off. I think this time he's not going to be able to keep his double denim from getting dirty. DC Carter spots crazy Jake Jolson. Jake seems to take way more bullets than anybody else, so that must mean it's a boss battle. That being said, Carter gets the job done, but at the expense of his denim. Just look at that denim. That's not going to come out in wash. It then cuts to the engine room where Hammond is asking for Frank to be spared. Nick Collins is like, look mate, I'll give you a break because of your dead wife. She could suck the wax off an apple and I had a soft spot for her. Mark doesn't know if this is a compliment or what, but he's in no situation to question these things. Nick says he can't be having the filth. Filth is in Frank Carter, knowing his business. The triads agree. DC Carter's like, just leave Hammond. I don't need help from criminal trash. I'm Frank Carter from the flying squad. I'm the motherfucker who puts on the handcuffs too tight, and I'm the motherfucker who wears double denim. Bitch! And then it's Charlie's turn to say a little speech. He says he were running this town while your lot were still getting slapped across the face for losing at Pogs. He then goes and name drops Ronnie and Reggie, you know, the Cray brothers. But nobody knows who they are, so he's like, you know, the film with Tom Hardy in. Oh, that one with the brothers from Spandau Ballet. But no one's really bothered. He then claims that all other gangs have ruined it because back in his day, he only did, like, good crimes. He then realises he's just talking bollocks, so he pulls out the detonator. All the gang start shooting at him, but they all miss. And Frank's like, no, don't do that. Bloody hell, you're going to set the bomb off. So they all decide to fuck off and get out of harm's way. Charlie begins to sing, Land of Hope and Glory. The bomb shows there's 3 minutes to go before it explodes. Frank makes his way out of the engine room. Outside, clearly the Yardies, the Triads and Collins gang haven't been listening to a word Charlie was saying because they're all stood there, NPCing, shooting each other regardless of the consequences. Frank even tries to reason with them.
Half the waterfront's about to go up and you're still arguing.
But they take no notice. I'm guessing they're willing to die for their gangs. Because thug life is better than real life. Because in real life, you have to pay bills and scan QR codes for menus at restaurants and stuff. Anyway, I digress. Frank makes it off the boat in the nick of time.
Better